on a minute, you weren't doing this so that you could stumble, become an addict, screw up your family, screw up your life. You're doing this for a reason. What is that reason? And I love that awareness. And I know that you do the transpersonal hypnotherapy. And I'd love to kind of dive into that a little bit, because that kind of moves beyond the symptom and the relief. But can you talk us through that inner guidance and that what that observer consciousness and higher self looks like?
Yes. And I love how you just described the subconscious as a positive. And I feel like throughout the last couple centuries, psychologists or psychiatry, it was all pathology, like what's wrong with you. And I was a little disillusioned when I studied psychology in undergraduate. I worked in cancer care and learned hypnotherapy kind of for symptom relief, which is valid and good. But transpersonal hypnotherapy is what I first trained in, and it sees the person and the mind as bigger than just day-to-day life. So it's your emotions, it's your physical body, it's your intellect and mental self, and then whatever your spiritual beliefs, it's your soul, it's your big.
My name is Terry Messenger, and I am
Hey, and welcome to Terry Messenger's Genius Zone. And, this is the place and the space where you are going to get your own free masterclass, absolutely free. Everybody has a story to tell. What's yours? Why do you exist? Do you matter? Are you loved? Does your life mean anything to this world? What is your why? What is your life purpose? Are you ready to turn your life around? Know your mission and get crystal clear clarity of what you were born to do. The good news is I have the key to your success. Hey. Well, what a way to enter 2026. And hands up if you're with me about putting 2025 in the past and just embracing your greatest power. Well, if you want to embrace your greatest power in this show, as you know, we bring masterful, legendary coaches, healers, and leaders on board so they can bring the greatest value to you for free in the comfort of your own living room. And in this episode, this is going to be a game changer for families. So did you know that as a parent, sometimes there can be so much problem with your children. There can be so many issues that are happening in the family dynamics. And as I bring this beautiful clinical hypnotherapist on board, she is going to really bring her authority. And she is going to showcase as a clinical hypnotherapist, an occupational therapist, how she has bridged science, the nervous system, regulation, and spirituality. You're also going to get something really powerful that, if you went to a counselor or you went to a hypnotherapist, you would pay hundreds of dollars, and it's going to be in your living room for free. So with no further ado, I bring you the beautiful Cally Stewart. Hello, Cally. How are you?
Great, Terry. So excited to be here.
Yes, and so am I. So where are you? Whereabouts are you in this world?
I am north of Boston, Massachusetts, in the United States. I'm working out of a wellness center right on a lake in the suburbs, not far from Boston.
Wow, that is just so, so good. And I guess you've seen it all as you sort of work through with families and the dynamics of what happens, in families and, those with neurodivergent children. Now, neurodivergency seems to be a really big buzzword at the moment. And a lot of families, I was actually speaking to a very, very close relative who was talking about how the family is really shattered because of, the element of what's going on in their child's life. And you talk about healing the parent first. Can you just, enlarge on that? Why is that so important? I know myself firsthand, but I want to hear from you. Why is that so critical?
Yeah, I really enjoy working with adults who want to be parents in the future or are already parents, and they want to clean out their stuff, their own childhood traumas, so that they can show up more fully for their own children if they decide to have children. But I also enjoy working with children and teens. My background as an occupational therapist, I've worked with all sorts of different ages and life stages, from young children to teenagers and 20-year-olds and adults. So the parent is the one that signals to the child what's normal, what's safe, what's expected. So oftentimes I see teenagers or younger children, and I always encourage the parent to explore hypnotherapy with me, just to learn some tools for their own nervous system down regulation if there's anxiety or anger, or maybe there's depression and they need some more help, which I'm always an advocate to collaborate with their therapists or encourage them to seek more longer term mental health support for them, because
And
a child can't just
yeah.
exist in isolation to the system, the family.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, 100%. It's interesting that it's almost like sometimes our children can reflect back to us energetically what is going on in our own lives. Now, you know all about timeline therapy. You understand about the transformation going deep into releasing trauma and, obviously dealing with these things. And I happen to know myself that I had a couple that came into the clinic one day and they had a drug addicted teenager. But what was actually happening is they were enabling it. So they didn't realize it. They loved them and they just wanted to do what they thought was best. But it's interesting when they realized they were enabling their behavior. And also because of the work that you do, and obviously I do the same work, where we can go back and track on the timeline about what imprints and what DNA trauma bonds are relative. So can you talk to me about the trauma bonds and, what it means to actually be able to track back and release those trauma bonds from ancestral lineage that quite often are acting out in their present lives today?
Sure. And I might start with the idea that ancestral sometimes sounds big and lofty and hard to access, but it's your own parents, your own grandparents, your great grandparents. And you and I both do a certain type of timeline technique. I have training in advanced regression techniques through Paul Arand. He's a transpersonal master hypnotherapist in New York City. And he's also affiliated with the Michael Newton Institute for Life Between Lives, which is quite spiritual and powerful. But going back to just the basics, I'll share my own story. I grew up in a very creative, sensitive family. I was the oldest and still am of 4 children, and my parents are very sensitive, creative, loving people. And then there was several deaths in the family when I was a teenager, all within maybe 2 years. My grandmother died unexpectedly in her sleep the night before my grandparents' day, so she didn't show up to my school. And I just recently processed that, actually. And then there was other deaths very close in line. An uncle died in 9/11, very sad. And then my dad's sister died of cancer pretty young, and it was boom, boom, boom. And so that's an example of a trauma bond. And I think the tools that my family had weren't always the healthiest. We were a very social family, a lot of drinking and smoking as I got older. And that was a habit I had after high school and college. So, but recently I did my own regression with one of my colleagues just a week or two ago. This is how powerful it is. And my grandmother showed up, and the grief my mother couldn't process at that time, I was holding perhaps some of it. And it was very profound just a couple weeks ago, going into trance and being regressed or guided back in time. So that was very powerful. And I feel lighter, and I don't know if it will help my mom too. You know, these things are energetic. So if I shift, maybe she will shift, or she'll do her own work through her own modalities. It was a tough time, and we didn't know how to process it then. And that was part of the reason I stumbled upon hypnotherapy.
That's so powerful. And look, I hear you about people turning to drugs and alcohol as their go-to, not because they want to F their life up, but because they're really wanting to numb the pain, and they simply don't have resources. And, you know, I guess the parents, my husband had this little saying that the parents' dysfunction is the child's normal. Mm-hmm. So it's very interesting when you grow up and you may see how alcohol is the kind of normal thing to do. And then, of course, you know, when we're engaging in that, we become, when it becomes power over us, that's when it's a problem. And I don't know about you, Cally, but as a hypnotherapist, anything that becomes a power over our own lives is where we need to completely stop and, you know, just make a change to what's going on. And look, you know, obviously your story is very powerful, and, you know, this is where the Genius Zone is all about transmuting pain to power. And, you know, so you've been able to change your life through the, you know, all of the, how many years? I think it's 17 years you've been.
Yep, about since 2009. So this coming fall will be 17 years when I was trained, and I just soaked it all in. I loved it, and I keep learning all the time.
We must be soul sisters. Like, you know, I was doing the same thing. In fact, I started out with the neuro-linguistic programming, and I'm going to talk to you about the timeline therapy after, and you're going to showcase something very, very powerful that's going to really help people to regulate their nervous system. So you want to stay to the end, because the best is yet.
When you just brought up that idea of power over, the simple strategy that I'll be showing at the end is so simple, but really, really helpful to take your power back and to regain a sense of calm, center for yourself.
Groundedness. I love that. And if we can teach our children that, and I think too, for people out there to be aware that, what's happening in the family dynamics, when you bring that awareness that, everything is happening for a purpose, and it's about learning and understanding what the purpose is. So obviously you wore a big burden. Like, you sounded like you were kind of like that person who almost shouldered the grief that your family went through, and you had to stand in your leadership in a way. But then, of course, your humanness sort of turned over to alcohol. And did you say you became addicted to both alcohol and drugs, or?
I would say it was the binge drinking and like college years, before and after college, and kind of the wanting to numb or black out and just not deal with life. And my hypnotherapist teacher, how I learned it all, kind of helped me not judge. There's so much shame and self-judgment attached to it, and she's like, you just like to check out. And I think finding hypnotherapy was like an alternative, because you can get a break from the external stressors when you use self-hypnosis or hypnotherapy sessions. So it was a nice shift. And then the cigarettes was like almost a dopamine, like a reward I would give myself in high school. I was 16, 17, 18, after I finished my homework. So it was, or while driving. And then I would try to stop. In college, I was an athlete, so I was a little bit conflicted, but the addiction was so strong. But hypnotherapy was really powerful in releasing that connection. I thought I had the cigarettes. I thought I needed it for some reason. And I know there's other people that maybe have a longer term. Mine was 7 years of using cigarettes, but everybody's unique, and you need to find out what your connection is to them, and then honor it and unravel it a little bit and release it.
I love that. Honor it, unravel it, and release it. That is so powerful. In fact, you took the words out of my mouth, because, what I was going to say is, it's interesting that a lot of people beat themselves up for what they're doing wrong in life. They're self-sabotaging. They're not achieving their goals. They're getting caught up in those patterns. And yet, what we're taught as hypnotherapists is to actually honor our subconscious mind and understand that, hey, hang on a minute, you weren't doing this so that you could stumble, become an addict, screw up your family, screw up your life. You're doing this for a reason. What is that reason? And I love that awareness. And I know that you do the transpersonal hypnotherapy. And I'd love to kind of dive into that a little bit, because that kind of moves beyond the symptom and the relief. But can you talk us through that inner guidance and that what that observer consciousness and higher self looks like?
Yes. And I love how you just described the subconscious as a positive. And I feel like throughout the last couple centuries, psychologists or psychiatry, it was all pathology, like what's wrong with you. And I was a little disillusioned when I studied psychology in undergraduate. I worked in cancer care and learned hypnotherapy kind of for symptom relief, which is valid and good. But transpersonal hypnotherapy is what I first trained in, and it sees the person and the mind as bigger than just day-to-day life. So it's your emotions, it's your physical body, it's your intellect and mental self, and then whatever your spiritual beliefs, it's your soul, it's your bigger picture self. So we learned ways, this was back in 2009, to befriend the parts. And a lot of psychologists and social workers do the same positive type of psychology, or very beautiful tools that they have as well. But I was just I fell in love with hypnotherapy because it's very positive and creative, and visualizing or sensing these aspects of yourself, your inner child, your emotional part. Mine looked like a wolf in a cage. When I was 23, I didn't express myself growing up in a home that was, loving and fun, but there was something not quite right with emotional processing. So that was an eye opener when I first took that training. So I love doing self exploration sessions with people. Some of
That's
my sessions,
amazing.
yeah, so they could just be pauses so that the person has time in their subconscious to gain wisdom and insights.
Yeah. So for the person out there that really doesn't have a clue about hypnosis, self-hypnosis, and obviously you have, studied this, practiced this for many years, and we know that the reason it works is because we are getting underneath not just the logical, because the most people know at a logical level, this needs to change. I want to be a better parent, or I want to raise better children, or I want to be able to have this life that is more fulfilled. It's not about their logic, because people generally understand that. It's the deeper part of that, subconscious mind. So I'm interested, just out of curiosity, because I obviously have learned hypnotherapy the traditional way, and it is through closed eye. It's about, allowing that person to become one with themselves. Do you use the closed eye, and do you do the trance state so that they are in that very, I guess, that, do they call it alpha, theta,
Mhm.
mindset, where their mind begins to be open and curious to those changes? So, talk me through the transpersonal hypnotherapy, and tell me about, what that looks like when you are putting a person into trance. Like, what are some of the key strategies that you're using to do that?
Mhm. I do use closed eye trance states. I dim the lights and put on quiet music usually. And it's the layers of consciousness. Our conscious analytical mind is vigilant and trying to see our environment or understand the problems or things to anticipate. And that's not what hypnosis uses. So it's reassuring that part of the mind that they can trust the practitioner. They understand they're learning a skill set, and that their mind is naturally wired to go into trance states like daydream states or highway hypnosis, or artistic endeavors, even sports and music. It's kind of an altered state of flow. So I really try to normalize the positive and natural benefits of hypnosis. But then you're right, Terry. It's to me, I've been using the phrase expanded consciousness, because the mental mind or the conscious mind might be encouraged to just sit down or lie down and rest and observe. But then it's using like that's the tip of the iceberg. It's using all parts of you, your your heart, your emotions, your voice, what you want to say day to day, what do you stand for, and then your body. And our body is amazing. It holds so much. So I use a technique called body wisdom techniques. It's trademarked by Paul Oran, who's been a teacher of mine. And that's fascinating. That's following an emotion or a sensation in the body back to its source, or previous experiences with it. And it's this fall, I had two women in the same month. They both stopped biting their nails. just by going back to like when they were 10 or 5 and they were stressed or they were thinking about school and high school. So we went back and the neuroplasticity, now they both have normal nails and they don't bite their nails anymore. So that was just a refreshing reminder to me this fall of how powerful these tools are.
That is amazing. That's so, so good. And I believe it's really key for people to know that hypnosis is not about anyone taking control of your mind. It's actually about you taking control of your own mind. So when you get a person such as Cally, who is highly proficient and specializes in the subconscious mind, what you can expect is really about the element of being able to identify what the dynamic is that's happening in your life, in the family. What are the family dynamics? Because sometimes, relationships can break down because there's, unresolved issues. Children can go off the Richter scale because there is, unresolved trauma bonds that are tied and linked into that. So, it's really about bypassing that critical mindset. But do you find that once you do actually deal with the parents first, that kind of then changes? Do you notice that? Because I've noticed that myself. You change the parents, and even before the children or the next dynamic comes along, there's something energetic that shifted. Have you found that?
Yeah. And even in my own life with my 2 young daughters, when I get help or work on myself, it affects them positively. And I do think it can go both ways. Because sometimes I don't work with the parents. I wouldn't force it on them, but I do encourage it. Or sometimes I've done small groups with a mother and 2 adult children on habits around spending and money. And that's pretty magical and beautiful to have the whole family in the room together. But they're all on their own path. I'm not, comparing them. They're each individuals. And they'll receive or they'll make sense of the sessions. Encourage at least 3 sessions on a goal. So that's a package. But it is really beautiful to see the dynamics shift within a family. And I do think it can go either way. The research shows that parents who get help with, for example, if the child is a lot of anxiety or a toddler has big emotions and tantrums, working on the child often doesn't do much. The research shows if parents take training on anxiety management or understanding communication. So that's a whole nother field, but I do think we sometimes look at the child and maybe it's actually comes further up. It's from further back.
Yes. That's powerful. So you feel that it's really understanding what's going on with the child. So if the child is perhaps, there's a lot of neurodivergence, and I think that's a bit of a buzzword. It's become so popular. It makes you wonder whether there is something in the water that's actually causing it. There's so much of it, and it can be very debilitating if it's, if they're not understood, because, I'm neurodivergent, but mine's ADHD. But it's really about understanding and embracing who you are. I mean, Elon Musk is neurodivergent. And I don't know about you, Cally, but I feel that, number one is to really understand that sometimes the behavior of the child is nobody's, as I said before, no one's ever deliberately trying to sabotage. So there's always that higher purpose. And it's almost like asking the person to own where they're at. And, what have you seen? What kinds of things have you seen with a child that perhaps is neurodivergent? where it's creating all sorts of chaos in the family. And, did you find, like, as an example, that actually, we discovered the mother had an ancestral lineage where there was a trauma back here? Do you have a story like that where it was relative to that? I mean, I know, for example, just, as you're being prompted to find that story, I know that I had a lot of guilt and shame, for example, and I grew up with a lot of guilt and shame, and I didn't know why that was the case. And I've told this on a podcast previously. However, when I was doing my master's, we went back on the timeline. So what had happened was I went back, and of course the subconscious guides you back to, a very significant time, usually an initiative element that causes the problem. And I was actually a 15-year-old teenage girl, and I felt very lonely, and I was on a train. And it was as if I was in the country, but I was transitioning to living somewhere different. And I just remember feeling a sense of darkness, loneliness, shame. And, after the session, when we came back, because, timeline therapy, sometimes you can do it closed eyes, other times you can walk through it physically. And I went home that night and I said to my mother, by any chance, because I knew that my grandma was obviously unwed when she had my mother, and she was only a teenager. And there was a lot of shame back then. And I said, by any chance, do you think Nan would have been on a train? And Mum said yes, because in the country, she had to leave. And so I had actually gone into the experience of my grandmother as a teenager, and I'd picked that up through the timeline. But because we were able to trace where the trauma was, the guilt and the shame, that was huge. But I guess you can relate to that?
Yeah, maybe in my own experiences. That being said, when I work with kids and teens, I keep things more grounded. I wouldn't do timeline therapy with or regression with kids, although there's this late teenager I'm working with. He's a twin, and they were taken kind of prematurely out of the womb. So that isn't as rooted in ancestry. But that being said, I would say stories and metaphors that come up from regression back to the source. It may be the 1800s or the early 1900s. I've had cases or my own experiences in my sessions for me, and it just puts things into perspective on maybe I'm carrying around a residue from my subconscious or my deeper self from my family history a couple generations ago. And I guess I wouldn't share somebody else's story, but my story, there was this sense, my brother and I wouldn't push this on him, but for me, and he might be open to this, he and I were on a boat together on the coast of maybe Scotland or England. This was all in my mind. I didn't know it was him. It was me as another being. Two men on a boat and fishing on a little boat, and a storm came up, and then he fell over. We got capsized. I couldn't save him. So that was very difficult. I moved through significant points in that life. I don't know if it was ancestral or my soul's past life or just a metaphor, but it was a metaphor that I couldn't save him then. And I'll share this, and I couldn't save him now. He's doing very well, but 17 years ago and over the years, he struggled with some serious drug use issues, drug addiction. So that was just a game changer. I felt a weight lifted from me. So it could be siblings. It doesn't have to be child to parent, but I feel that families are really rich with dynamics. And that session really, the addiction was like the storm. I had no control over the storm. I don't have control over the suffering he's having in this lifetime, but I can detach and love. So that, I think, planted a seed in me that I wanted to learn how to do that because that single session helped me. And I had been in therapy, and I went to Al-Anon, which is, I don't know if it's in Australia, but I'm passionate, whether it's addictions or anxiety or mental health. I see so much need in families, and we need creative solutions.
Yeah, oh, that's 100%. And what an absolute gift that you are for so many families. And, we're talking, if there is a family out there and they're dealing with high stress, trauma, and that people's, ideas and their value systems come from a lot of their beliefs. So whether that's the scarcity mindset in their finances, and at being able to track that back to where the core belief was. I mean, I was very, very fortunate growing up in terms of, wanting for nothing. So my parents provided extremely well. And, they had their own real estate business, etc. But what I did get was a part of the scarcity mentality that comes from my father's ancestral background, because he was born in a third world country. So even though he was wealthy, I was still acting out of the DNA of that scarcity and that poverty mindset. So, you talked about how you help people through that. What are some of the things? Do you use the timeline technique to help people with their scarcity? Because I'm sure that everybody would want to be abundant.
Yeah, I think that might be more to explore in 2026, because I typically don't see people for that goal, scarcity and financial. I had that one family, but I think that's a beautiful use of timeline to go back and then imagine energetically, or reframing that fear of losing resources or not good enough, or guilt around money, shame, whatever it might be. Or I did do one with a man who's quite a established psychic and channel himself, or maybe not channel, but when I guided him, he became a channel, which is when you just get access to really higher level information. So my sessions, that when I do a deeper dive, the person talks to me with their eyes closed, and I'm sometimes eyes closed, and I have a special microphone that records both of us. So he had some sense that past lives were very easy and privileged, and that there was a bit of complacency, or in this life having gone through that. But that was like each person's timeline is so unique. So that was one time it did come up, but I think abundance world has such scarcity mindset, but look what a beautiful world we have, and communities can do better than they are. I see a lot of struggling, but when people come together and they're positive, you can, grow things and create things. So I think you have a good idea there, going back in time to release the scarcity wound.
Yeah, the scarcity wound.
Much of that, but I've done it for myself.
Amazing.
But maybe the little practical strategies we could shift to, which they're very simple but easy to use. And some people have even used it, for example, in childbirth or during a dental procedure. So there's some practical applications, but then they're also able to just shift to your deeper mind, to your subconscious mind and body wisdom.
Right. Well, I love that. I absolutely love that. And what I'd like to do now is bring forward the strategy that we have promised our audience. And I guess it's around, really regulating the nervous system. And, you talk a little bit about, a unique form of not rapid eye movement, but a different form to help in stressful situations. So can I hand over to you so you can walk us through that beautiful strategy?
And it takes all but about 10, 15 seconds to do the simple eye movement. I'll end it with another minute or two of just some good old relaxation. But often people find this strategy helpful at night if you're trying to unwind, or don't do it while driving or doing something that you need to focus on, but as a reset during your day. And it uses your eyes. So our eyes are an extension of our nervous system tissue. They're part of our brain, actually. And we were talking earlier, Terry, about since the beginning of time, people gaze at fires, they gaze up at the stars. So there is something mesmerizing about how we use our eyes. And highway hypnosis, walking, running, that peripheral vision is just flowing, and that can be relaxing for people. So our eyes are very important. So use this trick, and I will teach it to you now. Make sure you're not driving because it requires you to close your eyes. So stop and pull over if you are driving, or just listen for future reference. And I'll do it as well. So if you can, find a spot across from you, and an upward gaze can be helpful, perhaps where the wall meets the ceiling or just slightly across and up. And as you stare, take a nice big breath in with your eyes open. And then breathe out, close your eyes. And then do 2 more at your own rhythm. So breathe in, open your eyes, look for the spot. Breathe out, close your eyes. Maybe your chin tucks, your shoulders soften. 1 more time, breathe in, open. Breathe out, close. And then the eyes sometimes float open 1 more time, but for another minute or two, just give yourself the opportunity to close your eyes. I've learned that even just closing our eyes for a little bit of time can get us out of beta brainwaves, which are busier, active, conscious, analytical mind. Then we're dipping into alpha. So eyes are closed, and just take a few slow, long, letting go breaths, dropping your shoulders. We'll share one final rush release using just 5 parts of your body. So when you take a nice big breath in, feel relaxed through your face, back, belly, legs, feet. And breathe in again. Face, back, belly, legs, feet on the exhale. And then 1 more time. Breathe in. Breathe out through the face, back, belly, legs, feet. And then when you're ready, just allowing your eyes to open, wiggling your fingers, shifting back and forth, and knowing that first part was the opening with the inhale, closing with the exhale about 3 times. It's like rubbing the belly and patting the head. It gives your conscious mind a task to do.
Wow.
So that you breathe in as you open. And there's a lot of different strategies out there, but over these 16 or 17 years, it kind of organically happened. And I do find the more you do it, it becomes helpful.
That's beautiful. So just to bring a little bit of conscious competency around that, you were really asking us to take a deep breath, and we were opening our eyes and then closing the eyes. And I guess if I'm sort of assessing it, the way that would work is that you are eliciting a state of presence in the person. And it's where they're almost, their brain is moving into this phase of, well, I'm opening my eyes, and they're feeling that process and closing my eyes, and then I'm breathing. And that process in itself is taking them away from all of the busyness and the stress and the trauma of life. And I don't know about anybody out there that may have just practiced that. But if you go back and you do that with Cally, what you're going to find is that your nervous system is going to be so much more relaxed. And, that is just so important. I think parents could even travel along with young children and teach them to do that.
My 5-year-old does that independently now. The 3-year-old's a bit still too young, but how simple. And it's training her very active. She's a very busy little girl. So it's really beautiful to see that one worked well for younger people. I've done other ones at the back of the thumb, not as effective for really little kids. But if we can have those types of strategies, or on every recording, when I meet someone, I do high quality audio recordings. Those sessions would just be me talking kids. I'm not going to have them share their subconscious with me. So for most of my feel good sessions for goals related to behaviors and stress, it's just a standard hypnotherapy. But I start with that so that then when they listen at home, it becomes almost like a conditioned response, but in a good way. They're learning to do it themselves. So I do find it doesn't, I don't do it on every session, but I like to start in the first session so that they have a tool right away.
That's so good. And I believe what a gift it is to be able to impart a tool like that can be a real game changer. So guys, if you have listened into this, may I say that this woman is absolutely incredible. In fact, I feel that there has been an element where Cally has really wanted to protect her, the confidentiality of her client. So you've heard her stories, but, this is all about how you as a parent can make a change to your child, even when you feel that it may be your child that is the problem. So what you've heard Cally talk about today is that quite often it starts with you. And also she covered how trauma bonds and ancestral patterns and scarcity mindsets is actually passed down. That was mindsets, by the way, not mindsets, but how that is passed down. And of course, regulating your nervous system. So that 10-second little technique that she has just gifted you with can be the difference between having a riled up child, or even yourself being anxious or stressed out, and then just being able to change. So what I would say to you is Cally's got a lot of resources. I'd like you to go to the show notes and stand by for our last little piece of a gold nugget. So this is a question I love to ask all my people, because it's almost like you come on the show and you really speak about the things that you've obviously spoken about. Then you get off the broadcast, you go, oh, I would have loved to share that. So if there is perhaps something that you feel that's on your heart, that's on your mind, where you feel that, you know what, I would have loved to have shared that, I feel like that's really important, what would that be, Cally?
I would like to share that I resonate with the words empath and highly sensitive person, and I've run 2 book clubs in 2025. They're therapeutic book clubs where they're paying clients in a small group, and both of them we read. There were 2 cohorts, 2 different groups. We read a beautiful book called Boundaries and Protection by Pixie Lighthorse, who that's her pen name, but it's to honor her ancestors in the United States. The native, her dad's side had native Choctaw. So I love everybody's story. And I think reading a book together with other sensitive souls can be really nice. And the book was very practical. And this is a kind of out in left field. Part of me, I think Sinead O'Connor from Ireland, who passed away a couple of years ago, there's controversy there, but I think she was a true empath and she could see the pain in the world and express it. And she had sometimes a struggle in her life, but I am thinking about doing a book club on her autobiography, which I did read last year, because I know there's a lot of Sinead O'Connor fans out there, and they're still mourning her death because she passed a few years ago. So that's on my mind, maybe for the fall, and to have us all read that book if you are curious to hear her own words about life.
Amazing. Well, look, I will drop these in the show notes. Guys, get in contact with this beautiful lady. Cally, I just want to say what an absolute gift, pleasure, and honor it has been to have you on the show.
Thank you, Terry, for having me.
You're welcome.
Bye.
A show where we have explored through this various topic, along with all the exciting new topics that we bring every week to enhance your personal mastery of excellence. Now, I'd love you to do me a favor. In fact, be part of the Legacy 1 million that I have in the vision for 2028. If you know someone who really would benefit from this recording, from this episode, please share it with them. And when you subscribe, you get notified every week of our episode as soon as it drops. So let's do that legacy thing. Let's share, let's care, let's enrich. And I look forward to bringing you another week of the most enriching content. So until next time, stay inspired, stay awesome, and keep on mastering your excellence.